This just in, Emoni Bates, the top player in the 24/7 Sports transfer portal rankings, is headed to Michigan. Eastern Michigan. It'll be a homecoming for Bates, who will play in his hometown of Ypsilanti. He was a five-star recruit in the class of 21, and at one time, he was the #1 overall player in the class of 22 before he reclassified. Went to Memphis, underperformed. Shot 38% from the field, battled injuries, and didn't even average 10 points per game. Emoni Bates is going to Eastern Michigan for some action. Let's bring in Adam Finkelstein. And Adam, I guess the first question has to be, when people are reading this, that he's going to Eastern Michigan, is, did no other big program want him?
I mean, I think that's a fair question. In fact, my colleague Travis Branham just reported that Louisville, which was perceived to be the favorite for the last couple of months, ultimately made the decision to move off him and their pursuit of him. Similar case with Michigan, which was initially perceived to be the favorite. They elected to go in a different direction, specifically with Duke transfer Joey Baker, who's nowhere near as dynamic of a talent, but is just perceived as a more reliable option at this point. So I think that question, we don't have a definite answer to it, but certainly that is a fair question at this point. That is where the intel is pointing right now.
Okay, so what happened? Five-star recruit comes into Memphis. I think he scored 17 in his first game, looked good, and then it was all downhill from there.
Yeah, and it really dates way back to before Memphis. I mean, he was 14 years old and already being hit with the child prodigy, title. He was 15 years old, and I was part of it. I mean, I said he was the best 15-year-old I'd ever seen before. So, it's unfortunately it's turning into a little bit of a Felipe Lopez story. Someone who had all these expectations and then just didn't really live up to them. And I think has ultimately just been burdened by them, quite frankly. So it's almost become a bit of a sad story where you're just hoping for him to, he's never going to be the type of generational talent that we hoped. But at this point, we're just hoping for him to kind of regain at least something of what we initially projected.
What did we learn from another five-star who went the low major route last year? Patrick Baldwin, who went to Milwaukee and ended up being a first-round pick, even though he did not perform up to expectations either.
Yeah, nothing good. Patrick Baldwin went to a situation where he had the ball in his hands. He was asked to be kind of the alpha creator. Patrick Baldwin is really more of a spot-up shooter by nature. I think the problem with Emoni, it's a similar situation, but a different kind of kid, if you will. The problem with Emoni is that people want to see him be in a situation where he's willing, and his family, his dad, is willing to hand over control to a coach and say, hey, we're going to trust you to do right by our kid. We're going to give you total autonomy here, and we're not going to micromanage this process. At a place like Eastern Michigan, the Bateses have all the leverage. They know they're going to have the ball in their hands. Eastern Michigan is going to go as they go, not just in terms of wins and losses, but in terms of ticket sales and things like that. So ultimately, that's the concern here, which was not the case with Patrick Baldwin. Patrick Baldwin was exceptionally low maintenance, and everybody knew it. I mean, his decision came down to playing for his dad at Milwaukee, which I think he ultimately did to try and save his dad's job, or going to Duke. Patrick Baldwin had other options. Emoni Bates's other options were limited at this point, and so I don't want to say this is his last chance, but he's really got to get this one right.
Baldwin was the 28th overall pick in the recent draft of the world champion Golden State Warriors. Let's go back and look at that class of 21. And again, Bates did reclassify. I mean, had he stayed in high school, he would be in this class of 22 right now. And just look at the contrast in logos next to the names. Chet Holmgren with the Thunder logo. Paolo Banchero, the #1 pick in the draft, to the Magic. Shaedon Sharpe to the Blazers. Jaden Hardy to the Mavs. Not only is it not an NBA team, it's Eastern Michigan, a MAC team with not a lot of history either.
Right. No, and this is really glaring. And had you gone back 2 years earlier, you would have seen him at the top of the list. And I think that the thing is this wasn't This wasn't 24/7 Sports or any one outlet taking a flyer on him. This was the consensus. I mean, there was an ESPN article that widely compared him to Kevin Durant, LeBron James. Had almost a dozen different people on the record. He was as much of a childhood prodigy as I have seen in the 15 years that I have done this nationally. I mean, so to see his fall from that as a 15-year-old to where he is now, as I said, it's just turned into a little bit of a sad story where, you never want to have a bias, but just from a humanistic side, you're rooting for him to try and figure it out a little bit, because the last couple of years, it's really been since grassroots basketball came back from the pandemic, that have just been the polar opposite of what we expected from Emoni Bates prior to that.
One thing he does have going for him, he's still very, very young. Had he not reclassified,
Yes.
He would be a freshman going into this season. He'll be a sophomore next season with Eastern Michigan. Adam Finkelstein with us here on CBS Sports HQ. You can hear much more from him and read more from him at 247sports.com. Those are your guys for all your rankings, whether it's recruits or transfer portal updates. He was the #1 player in the transfer portal, and he's going from Memphis to Eastern Michigan.